Hey everyone, welcome to the Bible Book by Book podcast. Today we're in the book of Proverbs. Are there any bits of wisdom that you love to live your life by? Sayings that you can remember of how you like to live? Today I'm joined by Tom and Joy as we discuss godly wisdom in the book of Proverbs.
Some might say the memes of the Bible.
Very good.
Proverbs we love to, we were just saying, grab them out of context, put them on a fridge magnet, stick them on your fridge, or slap them on a mouse mat and be reminded. But actually the way that they're written, they are things that often just stick in our minds. We remember some of the where we've been in the Old Testament, where it might be, I don't know, the law sections or some of the narrative, they don't stick in our minds as much as probably lots of us would have proverbs that we could call to mind at any moment. I don't know, do you have any favourite proverbs?
Yeah, I mean, above all else, guard your heart, I think is from Proverbs 4, I think is a important one. Just that I look the sort of theme of the heart all the way through Proverbs. It's something we talked about a little bit on Sunday, but yeah, just that sense of like the heart being who we truly are, and then the other one again mentioned on Sunday as a face is reflected in water, so the real person is reflected in the heart, and that sort of sense of we like to present ourselves in lots of different ways, don't we, in different contexts, and actually God knows who we truly are. God knows our hearts. I think yeah, love that from Proverbs.
Yeah, I like the one about not answering a fool according to their folly. Otherwise, you're like them. I'm quite the social media, addict. So having that as a reminder is really helpful. Like, because it's so tempting to get caught up in the arguments and debates that are going on, and actually sometimes it's about guarding your mouth and thinking about what you're saying and what how you're responding to people, and not thinking I know the answer to this, so I'm gonna actually that's not necessarily the most encouraging or edifying thing to do, and so that one I have to remind myself of quite a lot. There's a good one as well. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. There's my mantra.
No comment from me.
Proverbs 11, a gold ring through a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. There are some real gems in there. Things that just live with you in your day to day.
Why is that not on a magnet?
Comes out on Valentine's Day in Chris's house.
Lucky Kaz. Proverbs 1.
I thought you were going to say something else there.
Proverbs 1, actually, where we start more seriously. Like I think it's Proverbs 1. That's the fear of the Lord is the start of all wisdom. Actually, there are. I don't know. How do you find, even just practically in your Bible reading, like this week when we come to Proverbs, how do you find you best read Proverbs? And maybe it's like similarly with Psalms and stuff. It is less. We're not reading a story, are we? It's not a narrative where there's stuff happening and events. And just how do you find? Yeah,
but there is a flow to them, isn't there? There's themes that are being explored, and you have to remember that it is written sort of poetically, and therefore there's metaphors and stuff that you sometimes have to get your head around, and ones that don't necessarily make sense to us because we're out of the culture, like nose rings and stuff. But you get the gist of the theme, and you kind of come out of it going, actually, this is the wisdom from this concept. And and sometimes with the Proverbs you can kind of take them out and just lift them and go, actually this is kind of summarising it and is a helpful thing, but actually you can kind of read a section of Proverbs and get that kind of sense of the what the overall message is and how to then apply it. I think
and I think as well that we were talking earlier, they are easily taken out of context, and sometimes that's okay. But I think the important thing to remember is they're proverbs, not promises. And so that sort of, you can very easily read some of them, do this and you'll live a long life. And it's like, well, okay, yes, in terms of you are applying the wisdom of Proverbs, and that will probably mean that you are a bit more risk averse than the person who's living in the way of foolishness or wickedness. And therefore you might live a longer life, but it's not a guarantee of... living till you're 100.
There's the teach a child the way it should go, and it will never stray from it or whatever. And you're like, okay, no, not been my experience. But there's some truth in it.
Yeah. And what we're sort of reading throughout the whole thing is there are almost two ways to live in a foolish way, or to apply the wisdom of God to your life and the benefit that brings. And I don't know, in reading through them, do you feel the conviction of some, or the challenge of some others? Do you feel the encouragement that actually I can see that in that decision I was able to use godly wisdom in making that? I don't know. How do you apply them to how you actually live day to day? Yeah,
I mean, I think for me, I found it particularly the sort of underlying theme of humility that is marked or the way of wisdom is marked by humility, and that sort of both in a sense of trusting God, fearing God, but also being able to receive correction comes up a lot. And that's sort of like the father son. Obviously Proverbs is kind of written from the perspective of a father to a son, and that kind of, you know, go this way in life and it's good for you. And I don't know, just how often am I in a position in my heart where I'm really willing to receive God's discipline that actually is a sign that he loves me and that I'm his child. But it's hard sometimes, isn't it, when you feel corrected, or when you feel like God's saying, no, don't go that way, go that way, you muppet, like, come on. And I think on some of life's bigger things I can be okay with that, but on the small everyday, when it's in the moment, when you're at home, when it's, you know, the kids need dinner or need a bath, and you want to, you know, I handle the kids wrong, and, you know, I say, you know, I'm a bit too, I don't know, I shout at them too loudly, and Ali in the moment will say, oh no, you don't speak to them like that, and I'm like, what? Like my first instinct is defensiveness,
don't correct me.
and it's not humility. It's not, oh yeah, you're so right, I shouldn't be getting annoyed about the fact that Noah's not put his shoes in the right basket, you know, whatever. Like, not that, I don't think, yeah, maybe that's not actually ever a story, but those sort of small things that then, I think just the challenge of the way of wisdom is to be humble in heart, and to not just receive stuff in quiet times from Jesus, but from the people that God's put in our lives. To help us. Yeah,
there definitely is that sort of difference, isn't there? But when you look back over your life and you set the question, am I particularly a wise person or a foolish person? It's like, there's the big decisions, the big stuff. And you think, have I made some wise decisions in that regard? And then, as you say, there's the everyday, you know, how am I choosing to interact with people? Am I investing in the right friendships and relationships? And how am I approaching work and money and all that kind of stuff? Am I making decisions, you know, with integrity and stuff, like everyday things? So you might think, I've made some very good, wise decisions, you know, in my life. I've made good decisions about jobs and, you know, relationships and stuff. But actually, there's also that kind of everyday impact as well.
Yeah.
It's also quite profound, isn't it? That even as you've said, that one of the main threads that we can see through it, or the challenges, is the challenge for humility, and for because even just as we were joking before about what you do get on social media are little sort of pithy couple of hundred character nuggets of a meme of this is how you should live and it will make your life better, and you'll be happier, you'll be more fulfilled, you'll be more emotionally healthy, physically healthy, whatever. And very rarely in those do we, maybe sometimes, but very rarely do we see a sort of a humility approach to that. It's often, why don't you make this yourself the centre of your world?
You do you.
Or
that kind of,
make everything as good as you can for you because you deserve it. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with social media, the way people are using it, but I think actually it is profound that what we get from this book full of godly wisdom, often what it inspires in us is, we need to be humble, and actually we need to be willing to be corrected, willing to be teachable and taught, and to actually apply these truths to our life and see a lasting fruit and difference as a result of it.
Yeah,
I find that when I read the Proverbs, some of them it's like, that makes sense. If if you do that, it's likely to turn to that, and you think, fair enough. And then others, it's like, that doesn't feel natural. That feels, and you kind of get that glimpse of the upside down kingdom. That particularly when it comes to what's wisdom and what's foolishness. You know, it says, isn't it, in 1 Corinthians that the foolish and wisdom are, you know, it's upside down to what the world thinks. And so sometimes you read one and you kind of go, not sure. That doesn't feel like the natural way of doing things, and you just have to allow that kind of challenge to go in and go, but actually if that's the godly way of doing it, and actually and it's interesting, the whole, you know, nuggets of wisdom thing. I think even pre-social media we loved it. We love little nuggets of sayings that you can live by and stuff. I don't know why that is. I wonder why we like that so much. Little things that we can maybe just memorize, and we as people, you know, not just Christians, we like to be able to hold on to those little things, but we do seem to really like them.
I think it's cool in a way, isn't it, that you see these different sort of almost literary styles throughout the whole Bible, and that you've got for people who really love their history and a good story, you've got the historic narrative bits, and then for people who are a bit more creative and who engage visually, you've got the Psalms, and I mean, come on to Song of Songs in a few weeks. It's like, it's so evocative, like imagery wise, isn't it, and stuff. And again, Proverbs, it's like these. I love the fact that Proverbs is aimed at like the everyday parts of life. It's not like, it's not how to do this in the temple or how to, you know, take up this offering and make sure you do this right. It's like hey, this is wisdom for the whole of life. This is what God says about how you're behaving at work and how you're interacting with friends and family and how you parent your kids and how you hold yourself in single life and all, like, just, it's so, I think something that I've got in my note, like someone in one of the commentaries just says godliness in working clothes. It's that, like, which I love. There's just that real sense of like, yeah, this is part of the Bible that is designed to equip us to have those thoughts in our mind when we're confronted with situations where we are tempted to lean on our own understanding. And Proverbs goes, no, lean not on your own understanding, but seek God. And yeah, I think that's again a benefit of the series to go through in the way that we are, because we pick that all up and
pick up the variety.
How do you approach, because even in reading through things where there's these here are ways to live, ways to make decisions, ways to allow these proverbs to impact your day to day, how do you balance that alongside the sort of the mentality and the truth that actually in of ourselves, our own performance this side of the cross in Christ is still completely inadequate, actually, without Jesus, even if we follow every proverb. We don't come close to the standard that God requires to be in relationship with him. And how do you then, almost this side of the cross, go back and read these things, and how do you balance that, and is it still good for us to apply as much of this as possible? How do you do that without having a sort of striving performance mentality?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the key takeaway was Jesus has become wisdom for us. So actually, rather than, so we sort of said earlier, reading Proverbs with Jesus in mind and saying, actually, these are good things for us to aspire to. These are helpful little things to help us get through everyday life. But on their own, they lead us to a place of righteousness, works-based righteousness and trying to earn stuff. Whereas actually read in light of what Jesus has done and the life that he lived for us, our call is now to follow and befriend wisdom in the person of Jesus, isn't it? And it's actually as we, I think the John Mark Comer, again, I spoke about this on Sunday, like the being with Jesus, becoming like him, doing what he did. Like, it's just a beautiful, simple summary of, like, actually, if you want to pursue wisdom, don't just camp out in the Proverbs. Read the Gospels and get in the presence of God and observe how Jesus interacted with people and how he dealt with tough situations and what he had to say on things. Invite him into your heart by the Holy Spirit and just say, God, Jesus, I really need your wisdom. You might not be in a situation where you can just easily access the book of Proverbs or kind of conjure one up in your mind, but actually just saying, Jesus, I really need your wisdom in this really tough, something blows up or you're confronted with suffering in a really, tough form. Jesus, I need your wisdom as to how I'm going to approach this.
Yeah, and we're pilgrims on a journey, aren't we? So it's not like you're saved and then that's it. And you're even not doing it on your own. You're with other people. And I think when I think about wisdom, I think a lot about the people that I've journeyed with, like my whole life. I look back and think, who are the people that have inspired me, that I want to, we're meant to imitate Christ, but also one another and doing this together, and remember those who've mentored you. Who are those people that I've gone to in the past? Because I'm drawn to them because they're wise. They have wisdom. They have experience. We're doing it together. And I think for me, a lot of when I think about wisdom and wanting to be wise, it's not just for my own benefit, but I want to be able to speak wisdom, to my husband, to my kids, to my friends, my colleagues. I want to be that person that doesn't cause disruption and make situations worse, but actually bring something of benefit. And the only way to do that is to kind of apply it in your own life. And you kind of don't know if you've got wisdom until it's tested in some ways, until you go through something and you kind of realise, actually, no, I have built my life on some solid principles, and that's helping me now go through this situation. And that's when you're walking alongside other people and you're sharing that with them, and it's so yes, it's for me, but it's also for the body and for my family and
it's brilliant. And you even mentioned just the getting in the Gospels, or even just getting the presence of God, or getting in the presence of Jesus. And if I think back, you can think of a number of times where, I don't know, you might have all sorts of, confusing situations going on in your mind, or things you're wrestling with, or tricky situations that you're wanting to see breakthrough in. And sometimes even just getting in a gathered corporate context of worship where you enter the presence of God, or it might not be gathered, it might just be actually seeking God on your own through the scriptures, but just getting in the presence of God. And it might, it may well not be that you get any answers to situations, or nothing drastically might have changed, but actually just time in God's presence, just you leave feeling a peace, or you leave feeling actually my perspective has changed, and where I feel like these things were making me stressed or anxious or any number of things, actually getting the presence of God, suddenly I just see things differently. It's not like anything necessarily has drastically changed, but I just my perspective, my priorities have just been redefined and realigned back to the point where let's follow Jesus and see his example and how he dealt with things.
One of the things that I think about, obviously, when you think about wisdom and foolishness, Jesus does the parable, the wise man and the foolish man. And it's a story that's been quite special to me this last year. I think about it a lot. And it's this idea that, both the wise man and the foolish man experience the storm. So that, for a start off, shows you that Proverbs isn't about guarantees. It's not, wisdom, live a wise life and nothing's going to, happen to you. The storm still comes, but the house is built on the rock. And so it doesn't get shaken. And it's that I feel like Jesus kind of summarises kind of all the wisdom literature in one go, but particularly Proverbs, that kind of this is why you do it. Yes, it's you're in relationship and you're walking with God and Christ likeness, but actually sometimes this stuff is going to happen, and how are you going to respond to that? What's your life going to look like through that process? And so that's the thing that particularly kind of feels classically, Proverbs just compares wisdom and foolishness, doesn't it? And then Jesus just does this parable, and like this is kind of brings it all together in one. What does it mean to be wise or foolish? Where are you building your house? What's the foundation of your life? And sometimes you don't know that until the storm comes. You're like, yes, you are my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. I'm going to sing that every week, but actually, until you go through something and you kind of go, no, actually my life was built on this, and now it's gone, and what do I do? And then other times you're like, no, I'm building my life on something firm, and it's yes, the house is going to get a bit, might need a bit of refurbishment afterwards, but it is still standing, and it's still on the firm foundation.
And what does that do for you in those moments where in the storm, where you're having to process and deal with things? What does that, what comfort does that bring in those moments that you found?
I found that it just brings hope. I think it's about where you've placed your hope, and if you've put your hope in things that then going to fall away, to know that you've gone through this thing. And yet it doesn't mean you're going to go through it perfectly, and you're not going to feel scared or frustrated or angry or any of these other things. It doesn't mean you're just going to go through it and go, well, I'm trusting God, everything's going to be fine. It's not like that, but you never feel hopeless, and you look at the world, and how much there's just no hope anywhere. People are putting their faith in, at the moment, democracy and politicians and, all sorts of other promises that are being made by people. And you just think there's no hope. And yes, life is going to be tough and you're sometimes going to feel these things, but there is always hope. And that is incredibly comforting.
Yeah. As just picking up on one more thing as well, I think like in going through this whole series, I'd never quite clocked before that pretty much all the way through the Old Testament, and until you hit some of the sort of proper forward-looking prophetic stuff like in Isaiah, people are not living with an expectation of new heaven, new earth. People are not living with an expectation of like the glorious day where Jesus comes back and makes everything better and brings justice and wipes away every tear. And I think so the pursuit of wisdom and justice and hope in the midst of suffering was like we need it here and now. And actually the privilege we've got of being, AD, not BC.
We know the end of the story.
Yeah. And like just even the wisdom of Jesus, like actually in Proverbs, it's like the way of the wise, which leads to a flourishing life, or the way of the wicked, which leads to destruction and ruin. Actually, when Jesus, just as you were talking about the parable of the wise and the foolish builder, like the inevitability of the storm. Like Jesus isn't promising in the vein of Proverbs, live this way and all will go well for you. But he's saying, hey, live this way with me at the cornerstone of your life, and you will endure life's storms. And then we get to know the promises of future glory and freedom from suffering. And I think, again, another reason why it's important to read Proverbs with Jesus in mind.
It's good. I've only just seen, and I don't know whether you've seen it, Joy, but at the end of Tom's preach notes, he's drawn himself a few little musical notes. And that, for everyone listening, that's because Tom is an unbelievable singer.
Yeah.
So
perhaps
you could just sing
Finish
us out.
my secret.
Sing us out on the podcast.
We responded on Sunday in Tottenham with "Be Thou My Wisdom."
Okay.
Or "Be Thou My Vision" is the song.
Next time you see Tom, ask him to give you a few bars.
Yeah, I won't bless the listeners with my singing voice.
Well, we've all lost.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us for that conversation. That was Proverbs. Next week we've got Ecclesiastes coming up, and I'd just love to remind you, you can actually get loads of resources for this Bible Book by Book series. If you head to kingscommunitychurch.co.uk/the Bible, you can find study guides, you can find reading plans. Let's make the most as we journey through the Bible together.